Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni. I'm your host today. I'm joined by Cody Thompson, our co-host. Hey, Cody.
Hey, Pat.
We've got Amy Hyatt, one of the co-founders of our company. Amy, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
We've also got Matt Lencioni, our engineer, one of the people who helped us develop this. He may or may not speak today, right, Matt?
If he does, it'll be reluctant.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. He always says, don't make me talk. And we're like, dude, you helped us come up with this. We want to hear what you have to say. But what we're going to talk about today, Cody, is what?
Personality versus productivity.
Right. Personality assessments and tools versus what we call the working genius is really more of a productivity tool or assessment. So what's the difference, Cody?
Well, and this is sort of born out of the question that we get a lot, which is what makes this different, or how do you differentiate this from other personality instruments that are in the market, like Myers-Briggs or DISC or StrengthsFinder? And while there is overlap and similarities, I think one of the even issues of this tool is trying to differentiate it. And so when we talk about this, we've been talking about it as somewhat like a 20% of it is a personality instrument, meaning that you're going to find out what your geniuses are. But the 80%, the large majority of it, is a productivity tool.
And how you work with others and get things done.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and the good news is when people ask me to differentiate it, I don't badmouth the other assessments. I love them. I mean, I've been a junkie for those for years. I love Myers-Briggs and DISC and all those different things. But what we realize is that this tool is so much more applied to the specifics of what kind of work you're great at and you love to do. And the application of it takes minutes. When you look at it and you think, oh, this totally makes sense, and I know how this is something I need to act on. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a different thing. A Myers-Briggs is a much loftier or deeper thoughts about personality. This is about how you get work done. And so what we found is that our clients, 10 minutes after taking this, they're like, I know exactly how this affects our team. I know exactly how it affects me. Here's what we need to do different. We're going to raise our productivity right away.
Absolutely. And the way I sometimes talk about it is what this model has done is actually create a pretty systematized or linear way that we talk about work and innovation in some ways. It's like, hey, there are 6 activities that happen. And if it were just that alone, let's say what you had discovered that day on the board was just writing these 6 circles, it would help any team sort of identify where they're at in any process. Like, right. Oh, we're in product design. What part are we? Are in the wonder phase? Are we sort of responding to the needs of the environment?
That's kind of how the Nike guys responded
exactly.
to it. They were like, oh my gosh, we didn't even think about these middle phases.
And so even if it were just those 6 activities, that would have given us some language for here's how work gets done. But what happens to also be true, which was a discovery along the way, was, oh man, we're all uniquely as personalities gifted at 2 of these areas. So right. in part, it's almost hard to differentiate the personality and productivity part because it's overlaid onto a productivity model.
Right.
That's right. One thing that's been so helpful to me is that these are behaviors. So even though my geniuses might be wonder and discernment, I can go behave in a way that helps me get my work done. So for example, yesterday, I think I said, I got to go do 45 minutes of tenacity work. And that just helped me frame up what I had to go do for 45 minutes. And even though it's not my working genius, I'm like, I'm just going to buckle down and do it. And because I had that language, I was able to get a lot more done rather than bouncing around.
And our next podcast for Working Genius is going to be about the vocabulary of the working genius and how we use these letters like verbs.
Right.
So we're going to talk about that thing,
right?
Which we love talking about. But it kind of gets back to the easy application. People know exactly what this means about what they should do and how the team needs to be reorganized.
Yep.
Whereas I always tell people, don't use the Myers-Briggs for that or DISC because it doesn't necessarily connect specifically. Like I'm an ENFP. I don't know what that means about my job, but that I'm an inventor and a discerner is I know exactly what kind of tasks you should put me in.
And you two are both ENFPs and have different geniuses.
Right.
Exactly.
And you still have to, it's just how we're getting work done. So when we're missing one of the geniuses, we know what we need to go in and do.
Right.
Exactly.
It's almost as if you just had the 6 gears up on a whiteboard at any point, you could actually look at any project that you're working on. Let's say it's on a sticky note. You write whatever product or project or...
Like right now, we're launching the certification program for Working Genius.
We could plot that on the graph of like, where is this? And we're in the invention, discerner, almost to galvanizing phase of that.
Right.
You know, so we're refining what does that look like and what's the script. And that's where the tools like DISC and Myers-Briggs, like you can't say, hey, it's not a productivity model. So it's not like you say like, oh, work starts at extroversion and it ends at judgment or perceiving, you know? So that's what makes it unique. And I would say that Strengths Finder has some overlap for sure, because it's about operating from an area of your strength. But what it doesn't do is succinctly and simply put it into where does that fall in the process of a project or life cycle of something.
Right. And I think Strengths Finder is very interesting. And right away, I met Tom Rath, the guy who put it together, and I went and I did it, and our team did it. But there's so many different strengths, and I have 5 and Amy has 5, and I can only remember a couple because they're particularly interesting. Like I'm a wooer, but I don't know what that means about how I go to work and do things every day.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't know how it matches with Amy's or with yours, Cody, or yours, Matt. And see, that's the key to this. We can look at this and go, we have a gap as a team in that genius, and here's what we better do to fill that gap.
The working genius makes that so much more simple.
Right.
Well, and it's certainly not disparaging that, even by way of talking about it's really about differentiating it, because, I remember taking the Strengths Finder in college. There's a lot of wonderful things in all of these tools that we're using, but I think the differentiator is around, oh man, this has a very like strict guide parameters around here's how work functions. Here's how you slide right into that. And that's why on the last podcast that we talked about finding a job or career, it is actually far more applied to what is it that you're going to do when you get that job or career. We use that marketing analogy. Are you a ET? Or you want to be on the implementation side of marketing? Or are you on the WI side? You want to think of the next Coca-Cola campaign with polar bears or whatever, you know? And so it really gives some more language and handles in a really simple way.
And I do think that I was on on a call with a couple hundred CEOs a couple days ago, and they were like, what's the difference between this and all the other assessments? And I think now, and you gave me this language, Cody, this is really a productivity tool, personal productivity and group productivity. And it translates toward getting more done, enjoying it, and accomplishing more and being more successful.
Yeah. And that's why it fits so squarely with the other things we do around building a healthy organization and creating healthy teams through using the 5 dysfunctions and other things. So,
yeah, I do find it interesting. It might actually be interesting to the listeners too, that when we were in the discernment phase of how should we push this out into the market, that was a conversation that I remember, a distinct one, because we thought, now should we push this out as a team tool, or do we push it out as an individual tool? And because we've got other teamwork oriented things. And what's so interesting about this is we wanted to market it so that everyone could understand what their working genius is. We thought, hey, any individual should be able to go out there and understand where they fit in the life cycle of like a work,
find a job
process.
Or change their job so that they can lean into their geniuses.
And we thought, and we made some assumptions and got lucky and were partially right around the fact that it's almost impossible to just end at the individual part of it.
Right.
Because the inevitable, transition to bringing this to your team or bringing it to your family or bringing this framework to how you get things done, that's happening over and over and over again. So an individual might take it and go, man, I'm a inventor tenacity person. I need to go find a discerner in my organization or in my family, Right. And so it's almost impossible not to make the jump from the individual personality assessment to the level of like the productivity sub.
Right. It's funny because it was Laura, my wife, who said early on, these 6 circles should be gears because they really do interlock and fit together because they need one another.
Yep.
And that's another part of this. You look at whatever your genius is and you go, well, which other geniuses does that interlock with? Because they need to serve one another to get things done and move the ball forward.
Yeah, it's funny. I just presented it to a group of people who, many of them, there's this term out there like solopreneur, right? Which is like when you're an entrepreneur and you're on your own. And as we present this, my first question to all of them is like, so what parts of this, if these are your geniuses, what are you outsourcing? Because you need these other ones.
I was just thinking, searching for vendors and partners, you better figure that out.
It's either outsource, hire, or get burned out. Which one of those 3 things are you going to do? And it's because when you look at it, it's like you have to have all 6 and no single person does. So in a model where all 6 of these are required for work, there's no other options.
What did they say? Did they have any like interesting observations, or were you just talking? And
Well, mostly I do the talking. No, I'm just kidding. Whenever I stop talking so they can ask questions. No, it was interesting. What it did is it was an aha, like a light bulb for many of them saying, oh my gosh,
that's why I'm stressed.
This is why I love doing this part.
Right.
And this is why I do get miserable or frustrated at this other side. So it gave them a really clear language to go, I need to hire or outsource for these things.
Gosh, I never thought of that. Finding a vendor. It should, like, people go, I need an IT vendor. It's like, do you need one to execute your IT or to design a solution or to evaluate things? Because one is not the same as the other. What do you already do really well? And if you hire the wrong one, they're going to want to do what you do well, or they're not going to be interested in the things that you don't.
Totally.
And a vendor, a partner, anybody that you bring on has to be filling in your gaps. And too often we think, well, that's the title of their business. I guess they do it. But the way they do it is probably going to vary too.
Yeah.
Or my friend who runs her own small business, she's a solopreneur. She is not a T tenacity. And so I think what she does is take a half day every week and just said, I just got to sit down and do my billing and all my stuff. And she just kind of makes herself do it.
Totally.
Like once you just, rather than letting it hang over your head all the time,
You know
just kind of have to sit down and do that.
I just realized, I'm sorry, Amy. I didn't
No,
mean to
that's
step on you.
okay.
I just realized that, so I hate to admit this, but we have a gardener because I'm terrible at E&T. I've talked about that. My dad used to mow the lawn and I used to get up and do it. And I hated it because he wanted me just to do what he told me to do.
Right.
And I always wanted him to go, hey, you design the yard, decide what kind of flowers to plant. How do you want to mow it and all that kind of stuff. Well, now I have a gardener. I'm super busy. And so is my wife and our kids. And I love the gardener, the guy who runs the company. We talked to him about his kids and ours and everything. But I get frustrated because his guys just come in and mow the lawn.
Exactly. They just do exactly what you say.
And I've said this to him before, but now I realize that I need them to look at my yard and say, Pat's an idiot on these things. I need to do this. Because otherwise I feel like they just do the minimum. And I've said to him, I will pay you more if you see around corners. But they're probably an ET company. And the guy who runs it is too. And rather than saying, I want you guys to make this yard beautiful. Because they don't think about that. They just do the specifics of what they do.
Right.
And so they're a partner vendor in my life, but I need them to have more than just E&T.
Well, and then you're like, I don't want to galvanize you around that.
Well,
yeah.
it is really interesting because we've talked about how the world is a little lopsided on the ET side of things. And I have a friend, meaning that more of the jobs are
for good reason, because eventually everything has to get done.
Totally.
But as a result of that, we've tended to overbalance, focus on that. It's like, well, let's just get people that will get something done.
Yeah. And I have a friend who I've talked to a lot recently around this, who works at a church. And one of his revelations is, as it relates to why is this a productivity tool, is at their church, they've lived largely in the GET. They kind of knew their plan. They knew exactly what was going on. And then COVID happened. And so they got so discombobulated. And what this did is it gave them language for, oh my gosh, we no longer know what to ET. The plan has changed. We have to innovate. And so they're using it as an innovation tool to move a new plan through the whole chain of work. And so they had to start back at wonder.
Right. And innovation starts with wonder. I was just going to say that. It's not just invention. It's like, wait, what's going on here?
What do we need? And how could we do this better?
How do you ask the right questions?
And because there is no model right now, they're having to ask the question and then tap into the people on their staff who have invention to say, maybe this is the new way forward for us. So it really, that's the way to look at it, is there is not a scenario. And I've even used the factory floor as an analogy. Even if it's a factory floor that is ET or GET, if there's no one sitting there, if you don't spend any time wondering, like, could we do this better? Should we be doing something different? You need all six.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is so unique as opposed to those other ones, is it gives you this clear, simple framework for that.
So what we want to say is basically the 6 Types of Working Genius is more of a productivity tool, both for individuals discovering their own productivity and teams, than it is just a personality assessment. And that answers the question, how is this different? Matt, I want to thank you for all your input. You did a fantastic job today.
Thank you. This is fun.
And Amy, thanks for being here, and Cody as well. So we'll look forward to talking to you next time on the Working Genius podcast, where we're going to talk about the vocabulary of Working Genius and how to turn these letters into verbs so we can communicate better with each other. Until then, thank you and God bless.